So you're an image bearer, but there's even more to it. You are an ambassador. Well, what is an ambassador? What do they do, right? An ambassador represents someone. They represent another person's agenda and their priorities, right? If our president, let's say, sent an ambassador over to England, and let's say that ambassador says, you know what? I don't really care about the president's agenda. I've got my own. I've actually got a better agenda. I've got a more important agenda, and I'm just going to kind of go to England and I'm going to live out my agenda. Chances are, if the president is, doing what he's supposed to be doing, he'll recall that ambassador and probably fire him, because that's not what an ambassador does, right? An ambassador represents the one whom he serves. And friends, this is an important lesson, I think, for us as parents to remember, that as parents, we are first and foremost ambassadors of God. Sometimes as parents, and I know that I can easily slip into this, I sometimes think it is about my agenda. I actually think it is about my plans, my timetable, my wants, my desires. And a lot of times I can think I own my kids. They're my primary responsibility. And I can actually lose out on the reality that I don't own my kids, that I am simply an ambassador of God. Paul Tripp calls this dynamic, he calls it ownership parenting versus ambassadorial parenting. He says sometimes we slip into ownership parenting where we think we own our kids and it's about our agenda. And Tripp says, no, we actually are God's ambassadors to our children. He says many parents are motivated more by what they want for their children and from their children rather than what God has planned to do through them in their children. Right? Ownership parenting is all about our agenda, our wants, our needs, our expectations. So then when those things don't get fulfilled, right, we can get a little ticked off. We can get a little irritated. We can get frustrated. We can get a little hot under the collar. Versus ambassadorial parenting, which is all about what does God want for my kids, right? What is God's agendas? What is God's priorities? Now, friends, here's the good news. Those two things aren't always mutually exclusive, meaning what you want for your kids versus what God wants. But the question is, who takes priority, right? Who takes the lead in this relationship, right? We constantly have to remind ourselves that our children fundamentally belong to God and not to us. Tripp concludes by saying, he says, parenting is ambassadorial work from beginning to end. It's not to be shaped and directed by personal interest, personal need, or cultural perspectives. Every parent is called to recognize that they have been put on earth at a particular time and a particular location to do one thing in the lives of their children, and that is to represent the will of God. I love how Melissa Kruger adds her voice to this. She says, while you may feel like all of the burdens and all the responsibilities, which all of us as parents could say, there's a lot of those. She says, while you can feel like those burdens or responsibilities fundamentally rest on you, remember it is God who is the ultimate parent, right? And friends, that's good news. That's good news for burnout parents, weary parents, tired parents, parents that think that they all have it together, to constantly remind ourselves that it is God who's the ultimate parent and we serve as his ambassador.